Welcome to the webinar on reaching out to municipalities and elected officials for a full frack ban. The presentation consists of a slideshow, so there will be no video. During the presentation or at its conclusion, if you have any questions, please use the chat box at the bottom. The presentation will last for about an hour, and there will be time for questions and answers at the end. If you have any technical questions, please type them into the chat box. Your voice is muted during the webinar, so we won't be able to hear you. You should have received 5 documents in your email. If you didn't, please let us know in the chat box. This will be recorded and available on YouTube. We'll be sending you an email with the link in the near future. Thank you.
Hello, this is Tracy Carluccio. I'm Deputy Director of Delaware Riverkeeper Network, and we're holding this webinar tonight with Berks Gas Truth. Karen Feridun, founder of Berks Gas Truth, will be joining the webinar as well as a presenter. We're reaching out to municipalities and elected officials for a full frack ban through tools that have been provided to you as attachments for this webinar. We want to mobilize support for a complete and permanent ban throughout the Delaware River watershed by engaging municipalities and elected officials to express their support for a ban. We're in a situation now that's a little bit different when we began the frack ban campaign over a year ago. And that is that we, yes, want a frack ban, but we now have to also fight the Delaware River Basin Commission to ensure that they do not allow frack waste and they do not allow water for fracking to be withdrawn from the Delaware River watershed as their natural gas regulations are expected to include. Why do I say this? What's going on? Well, the public's been demanding a complete and permanent ban on natural gas drilling and fracking and all related activities, including wastewater processing and discharges from and water withdrawals for drilling and fracking operations throughout every inch of the Delaware River watershed. Not allow shed. The DRBC, the Delaware River Basin Commission, has a de facto fracking moratorium in place, and it is under attack by industry. It includes a ban on drilling, fracking, wastewater discharges, water withdrawals for fracking, any operation related to natural gas drilling and fracking, and it's banned throughout the entire Delaware River watershed. But there's a movement afoot to lift that ban. The governors of the 4 states whose streams flow to the Delaware will be deciding whether or not to ban it for good or open up the watershed to the ravages of fracking and all its related activities in the near future. As you may know, the governors of the 4 states that flow to the Delaware, Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, and Delaware, and a representative of President Trump's federal government, the Army Corps of Engineers, are the 5 votes on the Delaware River Basin Commission that will be deciding the fate of the Delaware River watershed. So what's the next step? According to a meeting where a resolution was passed in September of this year, the Delaware River Basin Commission has been instructed to issue draft regulations by November 30th that will be put out for public comment. How long that public comment will be, we don't know. We don't know if this will happen exactly on November 30th or not, but we do know, because of statements made at that public meeting in September, that the public comment period will last probably 2 to 3 months. By regulation, it has to be at least 30 days. So 2 to 3 months of public comment beginning sometime after November 30th or on November 30th, and then a period of time after the public comment period is closed will probably be another month or so for administrative processes and the processing of those comments. Maybe they'll issue revised regulations based on those public comments. But we expect the whole process to be completed sometime in early 2018, maybe the spring of 2018. We just don't know for sure. But the next step, the next immediate step, is this issuance of draft natural gas regulations by November 30th. Now, these regulations could result in a full fracking and drilling ban or only a partial ban, but they will also be written to allow the dumping of frack wastewater and the withdrawal of fresh water for fracking, quote unquote, where permitted. That's according to the resolution that was adopted by the commissioners at that September meeting. Of course, it defies logic to say fracking is banned, but the toxic waste it produces and the water it depletes is acceptable. So we have to tell the governors to permanently ban it all, and we have to do that with voices from all over the region. What do we know? Well, we know that drilling and fracking cannot be done safely. In the municipal resolution that you received a copy of, and in the individual letters that you have received copies of, we outline and give a lot of references to scientific papers, health studies, and other sources of information that show how dangerous frack drilling is and the devastating effects that it's having where it's occurring. As a matter of fact, the weight of evidence over the last 7 years since the Delaware River Basin Commission initially adopted their moratorium on drilling in 2010 shows that fracking and its related activities pollute and gravely harm human health and the environment. What else do we know? Well, we know the public opposes fracking. And we also know to achieve a complete and permanent ban, we need to give those who support a ban a way to express that, because a lot of people, a lot of local governments, a lot of legislators just don't know what that pathway is. You should have received an email with 5 documents. Talking points, which mention a lot of different reasons locally why you should be against this, should fracking come to your neighborhood, and then broader reasons that they should be against this based on public health impacts, long-term and short-term environmental impacts, climate change, a lot of different talking points. You can pick and choose from these 4 pages of talking points to find the ones that are most going to resonate with your local municipality or the municipality that you choose to go to or the elected official you plan to talk with. And those second items that you got in those documents that you received is a copy of the Pennsylvania resolution. That municipal resolution includes Article 1, Section 27, a very important environmental rights amendment to the Pennsylvania Constitution that I'll talk about a little bit more later. It includes New York, New Jersey, and Delaware's resolution. They're the same, and they include all of the points with a lot of very rich information in the footnotes that you can share with your municipality. Now, we also have a letter for elected officials. It's an individual letter that can be tailored by the elected official to send directly to the DRBC on their letterhead to make a special statement about why they, as a legislator, are opposed to fracking and support a complete and permanent ban on fracking throughout the Delaware River watershed. And then finally, we have a sign-on letter for legislators. And that sign-on letter is meant to be used by legislators to sign on to in order to express their support for a frack ban, and to do so in a way that is very easy for them. They don't have to write an individual letter. You can give them a ready-made letter, they sign their name at the end of it, and they've expressed themselves in a very important and powerful way. So we're going to walk through these bit by bit and explain each of these tools, and we'll move on to our next part of the program now. So the tools that we're going to be looking at tonight were sent to you as attachments to an email. You should have received 5 documents. 1, there's talking points. The talking points have a whole list of various important issues that are considered by municipalities and elected officials and the public when they think about why do we need a frack ban. And some of those talking points are included in the resolutions that you have gotten or the draft letters that you've gotten, but they include things such as the current moratorium covering all of fracking and drilling and related activities, and the ban that we may get don't go as far as the existing moratorium. It includes how to look at the body of scientific literature that has been put together. It looks at and gives you links to information about why New York has banned fracking, why Maryland has banned fracking. It also looks at local impacts, things such as there are at least 1,400 truck trips that occur for every well that's fracked. So in a local region, that's the impacts that you can look at happening right in your neighborhood. Also, it talks about air emissions and water pollution that have a greater adverse health impact on those who live or work or go to school or frequent the areas that are within 2 miles of the gas operation. So the environmentally unjust aspect of that is that if you live closer to a well or a fracking operation or a natural gas drilling operation, you're going to have a greater risk of developing disease associated with the chemicals and the processes involved with those operations. Studies show that the closest have greater exposure and are more likely to develop those diseases and health problems. It also talks about things like noise and lights and changes in the quality of life that are really important for people who live around areas that are fracked. So a lot of these, there's 4 pages of talking points, and you should look at those and prepare what you're going to be saying before you go to the meeting. The other 2 items that, number 2 and 3, that you should have gotten as attachments is a sample resolution for Pennsylvania for municipalities or local governments to adopt, and that resolution is special for Pennsylvania. Also, and I'll talk about why in a minute, you also have a resolution for New York, New Jersey, and Delaware. Those are the same, and they can be adopted in any of those municipalities. You also have a draft letter for elected officials. Now, this letter is a template or a guide that an individual elected official can look at and write a personal letter to the DRBC expressing why they want a full frack ban. And then lastly, there's a sign-on letter for legislators, and that's a letter where legislators can sign their name at the bottom. Maybe they don't want to go to the length of sending an individual letter, but they'll sign on to a group letter. We're going to go through these one by one. There's a twofold goal for these tools. One is to engage our elected representatives, and also to amplify the influence that local government and elected officials have on this monumental decision that's going to be made by the Delaware River Basin Commission regarding a frack ban. The second reason is to educate and to outreach to different constituencies. We need to have more people know that this is going on. Not enough people do. And if we do that at the grassroots level, at the level where residents live and elected representatives represent them, then we'll be able to get the word out to more people that this is going on and engage more people to speak up on this issue. So the municipal resolution that I mentioned that you should have in your packet is for municipal governments. It can be used at city councils or borough councils, county government. It can even be used at regional agencies. The draft municipal resolution for each state is really similar, except Pennsylvania includes Article 1, Section 27, the Environmental Rights Amendment of the Pennsylvania Constitution. This is a very important environmental rights amendment that allows Pennsylvania much greater power. Unfortunately, the other 3 states in the Delaware River watershed do not have a strong environmental rights amendment like this. I'm just going to go through for a minute here what the Article 1, Section 27 of the Pennsylvania Constitution actually says, so you can have that in your head if you live in Pennsylvania and you're going to approach a Pennsylvania elected official. The people have a right to clean air, pure water, and to the preservation of the natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic values of the environment. Pennsylvania's public natural resources are the common property of all the people, including generations yet to come. As trustee of these resources, the Commonwealth shall conserve and maintain them for the benefit of all the people. It's very powerful and very important in Pennsylvania to bring this up. So, what are the steps that we go through in order to achieve a successful outcome on your municipal resolution? First, you register what local government you're going to approach with Delaware Riverkeeper Network for our campaign database. We have developed a database that has all of the municipalities in it and their elected representatives and their contact information. We don't want to have wires crossed. We want to make sure we're well coordinated. So if you're going to go to your local government or you have perhaps 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 municipalities that you plan on approaching, you need to send us an email and we'll basically put your dibs on those municipalities. I already have some emails from some of you that are saying different municipalities that you're going to. we'll put your name next to those municipalities in the database, and that way, when people check with us, we can say, no, Sharon's already going to that one, or no, Adrian's going to that one. Next, you need to start right away. These take time. Sometimes you will achieve a resolution being passed in just a month or a month and a half, depending on what nights the Board of Supervisors or Township Committee people, whichever state you're in, actually meet. But sometimes it can take 2 to 3 months, so you need to start now. And the reason for that is because we are unsure of the timing of this of the comment period, and we want to make absolutely sure that your resolution that you're attempting to get passed by the municipality is done in time for to influence the vote of the Delaware River Basin Commissioners. So they're supposed to come out on November 30th or by November 30th with the draft regulations. There will then be a period of time where there will be a public comment. By regulation, they have to have at least 30 days. In discussing this in September at their public meeting, they said it would probably be at least 2 months. It might be 3 months. And then there's a period of time when they have to respond to those and then do some administrative processes. So it will be well into 2018 before they take the vote. But we should really count on this process being concluded sometime between now and maybe the end of February, because we can't let municipal resolutions drag past the time that the vote is going to be taken. And the sooner we get them registered with the DRBC, the more power we have, because we're not holding these back. These are going to the DRBC voting members all along the way. And that way, they can be thinking and seeing the public's position on this as they think about the draft regulations and the upcoming vote. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Karen Feridun, because she has gone through a successful process in Kutztown, and she wants to share that experience with you. Karen?
Thanks, Tracy. As Tracy said, we've had pretty good success doing resolution campaigns in the past, so I thought I'd put together some tips to let you know what worked for us. First of all, we never presume that we can just show up at a meeting or that we could mail in, one of these resolutions that we're trying to get passed. We make direct contact with the secretary of the borough or the township, or if you can go to your county, that's great too. Whatever level of government, there's usually a secretary who manages the process of getting the packets together for the people who are on the board. And so that's who we contact. We ask what it takes to get onto the agenda. And so usually it's just a matter of requesting it, and we explain that we'd like to bring a resolution along. So once you've done that, be sure this time of the year to ask when that meeting would be. It's entirely possible that meetings are going to be either postponed or rescheduled because of the holidays. In fact, I've already seen some in my part of the world where they're not having their meetings the week after Christmas. So, you really need to check about when the meetings are. The other thing that you need to check on as you're speaking with the representative of the municipality is where you actually start. They'll probably tell you that right up front, but some places start with their Environmental Advisory Commission. So it would be a waste of time to go to the council meeting perhaps, because really you go to the EAC first. So you'll find out all of that when you have that preliminary conversation with the representative of the municipality you plan to go to. You should also ask at that time what they need. Do they need to have a copy of the sample resolution in advance? Ideally they do, and probably typically they do. But what format do they need it in? My borough here used to do everything in paper. Now they're doing things electronically. So you might be able to send the sample resolution to them by email, and that would be sufficient for them. Or, they may even be willing to make the copies so they can still take the electronic copy but make the paper copies. Some will insist if they do paper that they want you to provide those, and in advance. So find out how they need to receive the resolution, when they need to receive it, and so you can make sure that they have all the copies they need. They'll also tell you how many copies. It won't necessarily be the same number as the number of council members or supervisors where you live. We have 5 or 6, I guess it's 6 in our borough, but there are 11 people who need to receive the copies when we do these resolutions. So things like that, we'll take into account, like the mayor being there or the solicitor for the municipality. So all of that is important. They all need to have their copies. They'll go into the packets that they have. And the one great thing about that is that because they're receiving these things in advance, presumably they're showing up at the meeting prepared to vote. Now, they might not feel that they want to vote right away because they have lots of questions. And so when you go there, you should feel very comfortable about what you're presenting. So if you would review the talking points and you have questions, ask us for help, or if you really want somebody to come with you, we'll do our best to try to come along, and you would introduce us saying you're a concerned constituent, and here's the person I've brought along to address this. But ideally, it's a pretty simple ask, and it's something you could probably get down given how many municipalities we have to cover and how few of us there are. It would be better if you could do it on your own, but definitely keep in touch with us if you have questions. So make the pitch as brief as possible when you are doing your pitch, and the members of the council or board have questions that you can't answer, definitely say you'll get answers and you'll bring it back to the next meeting, or you'll send it to them in between meetings. But make sure that you're being responsive to their needs, and don't feel like you need to have the answers all at the tip of your fingers. It's legitimate to say you don't know, and you'll come back with an answer. So if they don't vote, for whatever reason, whether they have questions or that's just their process to think on things for a month, which is sometimes the case, follow up to make sure that no questions have arisen or that it's definitely on the agenda for the next meeting. Find out for sure, if there's anything more that they need from you. And be sure to try to attend that next meeting. Find out, like sometimes they'll tell you, oh, we're just going to vote on it, so you don't really need to be there. But try to find out the status, so that if you do need to be there, you can make arrangements. This might take a couple of months, as Tracy said, so it shouldn't be a deterrent, because sometimes you really truly don't need to be at all of the meetings, but it is good to stay with it so that they're staying on top of it and that they know you're serious. In one of the meetings we went to, it was the 6th one, and I finally said to the person, to the board really, you just listened for 45 minutes to some guy wanting to widen his driveway and needing a variance. And I said, this was about Act 13, a controversial law we had in Pennsylvania that was going to take away local control. And I said, do you really not think that you want that same level of interaction if they want to put, a well in Berks County? And then they voted for it. So, sometimes you kind of have to nudge them, but it's legitimate. Go for it. So you've followed up, you've nudged them, and so now the municipality has passed the resolution. Make sure the secretary has an electronic version. So the thing that you should have received in your packet would be a Word version that's editable, because they're going to need to go through it and change the township to borough if that's the kind of municipality it is, or they're going to have to add their letterhead, they're going to have to add signature lines and so forth. So give them a copy that makes it easy for them to work with. And then they're going to probably ask you who needs to receive what. So the DRBC, and it's all stated right in the resolution actually, but the DRBC needs to receive the official copy. Sometimes I'll ask you who needs to get the raised seal. That's another way of talking about the official copy. In this case, it's only the DRBC, and the address is given right in the resolution. But a regular copy needs to be sent over to Tracy so she can keep track of everything and know that they've been received so they can be used in the future, and so she can just keep a tally. So those are my tips. I'd be happy to answer questions when we get to the Q&A if you have anything that I missed or you have questions about. But for now, I'm going to pass it back to Tracy.
Thank you very much, Karen. So we have, once you've achieved the resolution, we have follow-up that we do with the campaign. First, you report your outcome to Delaware Riverkeeper Network so Matthew can put it into the database. And another thing that you should do is send a thank you back. And you could do this by email to the person at the municipality that has been your point of contact. You could send a little note. You can do whatever personally you feel is appropriate. But what you want to do is thank them, and you also want to keep the door open with them, because we may have a follow-up press conference or maybe at a DRBC public meeting or an event that we have where we want to invite some of the representatives of municipalities that have passed these resolutions to highlight them and have them say a few words. We plan on doing this in order to spread the word, let people know that municipalities and local governments are supportive of a full ban, and that they're so supportive they've actually adopted official resolutions. So make sure to do that follow-up. Now, the next tool that we're going to talk about are the letters. And there's really two letters, and you should have gotten this in your packet. One is an individual sample letter for elected officials, and the other is a sign-on legislative letter. And I'll explain what the difference is. So the individual letter is a letter that is signed by the legislator and sent directly to the Delaware River Basin Commission members. So you need to do personal outreach to the legislator staff. You don't just mail the letter out to them, and by the way, none of these tools are ever posted on social media or sent out to big lists, because this is inside ballgame stuff here. This is stuff that we're doing amongst ourselves in a campaign to achieve a full frack ban. And they're really supposed to be used one-on-one with your municipality or your legislator. So don't mail the letter out, but do call them or send them an email, whichever is the best way to communicate with them, and ask them what is the process for moving something like this through to the legislator, and then follow that process. You send them the sample letter. Now, in the case of the individual letter, both of them are very similar, but the individual letter is different because it begins out saying, as an elected official, I represent. And the concept there is that when a legislator sends in a letter on their letterhead, and they personalize it by saying I, and they perhaps add a sentence or two, and you should encourage them to do this, about why they love the Delaware. You know, maybe they go canoeing, maybe they go swimming, maybe they went to a Boy Scout camp or a Girl Scout camp when they were a kid in the Poconos or in the Catskills. These are all the personal touches that really make this individual legislator's letter effective. So that's really the difference here. This is not a cookie cutter. It's not carved in stone. This letter is really meant to be used as a guide. As long as they keep the general concepts in there, and of course we want them to make that first paragraph very clear, and that first paragraph says, I support action by the DRBC to enact a complete and permanent ban on natural gas development and hydraulic fracturing and all related activities throughout the entire Delaware River watershed. So that is very important to keep in there, but all the other aspects are what they really can choose is most important for them to say in their personal letter. Now, after you've sent the letter out by email and used their process, you should be hearing back, and usually takes maybe a week, 2 weeks. It could take a little longer, depending on how quick your elected representative is to their constituent. But if you don't hear anything back in a couple weeks, you can give a polite call and say, hey, just checking in with the staff. How is the letter moving along? Is there anything more you need from me? As you can see, these letters have a lot of footnotes, and every one of those footnotes is rich with information. So if they say, yeah, I wanted to know, what kind of scientific studies have been done, you can refer them to footnote number 5, which is PSC Healthy Energy Library, where there's 685 peer-reviewed reports that say that there's problems with fracking in terms of health and environment. So, that's the kind of information you can get back to them with, or if they need more information and you can't provide it, call us up and we'll help you out with it. The letter, once it's approved, once they write it, goes to the Delaware River Basin Commission, just like the municipal resolution did. It's addressed to each individual commissioner, but it's sent to the DRBC address. We have those individual commissioners' names, and we can supply that to you when you get in touch with us and let us know that you're going to be contacting your, or it doesn't have to be your, but an elected representative, and we'll be happy to send that out to you. Also, just for your own information, on the DRBC website, if you go to their website and you go to About and you click on the commissioners, all of their names and addresses are there as well. And they have alternates that attend the meetings, but you want to send, the legislator wants to send the letter directly to the commissioners, but through the DRBC address. Then you make sure you get a copy. You ask them to send you a copy because we want to keep a copy of every letter that goes in, and we want to be able to ground truth that every letter that has been sent is actually recognized. So at some point, we also, may do something similar to like a press conference or an event where we want to highlight them as well. So that's the establishing of the line of communications, like you did with like we talked about with the municipal resolution for follow-up events. So the next thing is the legislative sign-on letter. And in this, it's a letter that's very similar, as I said, but it's written from a group. And it really is an easy thing for a legislator who agrees that they want a full ban to sign. It's not as heavy a lift as writing a letter, even though that doesn't seem to take a lot of time. For some it does. So you want to target your state because you're going to have more presence being an in-state constituent approaching a state or federal legislator. So you want to target your state, and we have a database that also has, for all four watershed states, all of the state and federal elected representatives. So you should register with us to approach legislators in your region with the letter. We'll check off put your name next to that legislator, and we'll check it off that it's being worked on so someone else doesn't double do your work. So it's best to reach out in person if you can. Although if you have a good relationship with some of these state legislators, and some people have already developed through their various environmental work or constituency work with your elected representatives, you already have a good relationship, you might be able to do it through email. But the best thing is to reach out and go to something like maybe walking around the State House on a day when they have committee meetings, or when there's going to be a voting day for the House or the Senate. And also perhaps a convention or a gathering of some point, like the League of Municipalities, where a lot of elected representatives, state representatives attend. This was done last week in New Jersey, for instance, by New Jersey folks who are working on the campaign. So don't mail the letter out. I think it goes without saying at this point. Don't post it on social media blind. Don't mail it blind. Never post it on social media. Or post it on lists. This is something that is for us to use as a tool. The letter goes when you have a group of names on it. We can send them in. We like to send it in with no less than groups of 10. It goes to the Delaware River Basin Commission. It's addressed to the commissioners, and the top of the letter has the address, Delaware River Basin Commission, West Trenton. We'll provide you with the actual mailing address when you call and tell us that you're going to be approaching those folks. It's also on the DRBC website as well, of course. So keep a copy of anything, because we want to make sure that you log that in with Delaware Riverkeeper Network, and we can ground truth what's going on. We want to make sure that every sign-on letter, every elected official letter is actually logged in with us as well, so we can ground truth and follow them through. So again, we have campaign follow-up on this. Report the outcome to DRN, Delaware Riverkeeper Network. Matthew will put it in our database. We'll check that one off. And keep the door open again with the elected official. And let them know that we might have a press conference. We might have an event. We might have some place where we can highlight that they have participated and that they are engaged in fighting with their constituents for a full and complete ban on fracking and drilling and all its related activities throughout the Delaware River watershed. So we are going to be having a series of webinars on achieving a complete and permanent ban in the watershed. And this is the first of them. The next one is probably going to be when the DRBC issues their draft natural gas regulations, which, as we said at the beginning, it could be that they include a ban or a partial ban, but we also expect that they will include natural gas regulations to accept wastewater discharges into our watershed and to allow water withdrawals from our watershed for fracking elsewhere. So that should happen by November 30th. We're going to fight those regulations tooth and nail. We're going to achieve a complete and full frack ban, drilling ban throughout the Delaware River watershed. But we need to engage everybody to do that. Once these rules come out, we will be, as quickly as we can, looking at the highlights. We'll have a webinar to talk about what they really say and to strategize and talk with others about how we will move ahead in order to achieve our goal of a full and complete and permanent ban on gas drilling in the Delaware River watershed. So at this point, we want to open up to questions and answers, find out what's on your mind, and I know that a couple people have already been putting in some questions into the chat box. So go ahead and write in any other questions that you have at this point. And we see, have a couple questions here that I'll just start with. Please just go ahead and type in the chat box any questions that you have, and Karen and I will answer them. We're both here. So one question we have is this about pipelines? And the answer is no. This is not about pipelines or compressor stations. That is a totally different campaign. If you want to get involved in that campaign, we greatly appreciate it and we welcome you to it, but it is a different campaign. You can get in touch with Burke's Gas Truth on the last slide here is the website address, and then you can also get in touch with Delaware Riverkeeper Network. Our information is there, and also I would like to give you our email addresses, and we'll answer any questions that you have about the pipeline campaign separately, or any questions that come up about this webinar. My email address is Tracy, T-R-A-C-Y, at Delaware Riverkeeper Network, DelawareRiverkeeper.org. Can somebody put that in, because my chat isn't working? And Karen, could you give your email address?
Sure, and I'll type it into the chat as well. It's karen.feridun@gmail.com. So I'll type it in because my last name's a bugger.
Okay, and then to get information from the database, you would get in touch with Matthew. And Matthew, could you give your email address and spell it?
It's MATTHEW at DelawareRiverkeeper.org.
Okay, so second question that we have here is, what if my requests don't get any response? Well, if you let's say you send an email to a municipality and say, hey, we'd like to find out how to get on the agenda, and you don't hear anything back. So I would suggest a couple things, and Karen, you can chime in here too. But first of all, emails get lost. So give them the benefit of the doubt and say, hey, maybe you didn't see my first email. I'm reaching out because we would like to come and talk with your municipality about considering a resolution to support a full frack ban in the Delaware River watershed. And sometimes there's a couple routes of communication that Karen mentioned, but maybe you should take advantage of if your outreach to who you thought would be the point of contact doesn't work. For instance, the Environmental Advisory Council of a municipality in Pennsylvania, or it's called an Environmental Commission in New Jersey. If these commissions or councils are active in your municipality, you might want to reach out to them first. As Karen said, sometimes they want you to go through an EAC first. In Morrisville, I know Morrisville, Pennsylvania adopted this ban resolution already, and they wanted their Environmental Advisory Council to look it over and make a recommendation. And then they passed it after they got the recommended resolution, which was our resolution, from the EAC. So sometimes an email to the EAC. So Karen, do you have anything else to add if somebody does not get a response?
Well, we would never ever start with an email. We would always call first. So if you call and you're not getting a call back, and you've tried email, I would try different methods of reaching them. But the one thing I like to do, because hardly anybody does it anymore, is I fax them. And so, if they have a fax machine, nobody uses it, so they're likely to see that, and they've received it. So, it's a lot harder for them to weasel out of, ignoring you, because, you're probably the only fax sitting there. So that's just a tip. That works pretty well for me.
Great. Yes, and what Karen said is really important about calling. I mean, usually these things do start with a phone call. And sometimes, you'll get the town clerk, and she or he knows a lot more than anybody else about who to talk to. And sometimes you get really helpful people on the staff that'll say, well, I think you ought to call this supervisor. Or, this township committee person is the one that's going to help you do this. So a phone call, a friendly phone call, just really looking for help. Sometimes is more productive than anything else if you don't know the town at all. So there is a question here. Somebody wanted to know if is fracking for water and fracking for gas the same thing, and the answer is no. Fracking for water, there is a hydrofracking process that's used to stimulate water wells to increase their yield, but it doesn't use chemicals, and it's totally different. It's basically a Mickey Mouse type of hydraulic fracturing. They don't use nearly the pressure. It doesn't go deep. And it's not nearly, it's nothing like fracking for gas. Fracking for gas, it does entail chemicals and entails somewhere between 4 and 5 million gallons of water for each frack job. Each well can be fracked more than once, and the proppants and the chemicals that are added to the water are highly toxic. There is as many as somewhere between 750 and 900 different chemicals that are used today in fracking. They're not, of course, not all used in every formula, but about 40% of those chemicals, according to scientific literature, are highly dangerous and even carcinogenic. Many of these chemicals are regulated, but many of them are not, and the exact formulas are kept secret, which is a special gift that was given to the industry under an earlier Energy Act that was passed under the Bush administration. So fracking for gas is very different than fracking for water. And if you need more information on that, you can go to Burke's Gas Truth website. They have a lot of information about it. And Delaware Riverkeeper Network, under ongoing issues, just put shale gas development, and you will see loads of information about natural gas drilling and fracking. Did you want to add anything to that, Karen?
I think it's implicit in what you just said, but if anybody at one of those municipalities says, is this resolution going to ban any kind of fracking, that would be no. It's specific to the kind that would be extracting gas, not water.
That's a very good point, because the resolution is for natural gas drilling and hydraulic fracturing. So it's very important that you emphasize that. Thank you. So a question here, can the campaign database be visited as a group? No, what you should do is reach out to Matthew. He will look up the municipalities that you want the information for and send that part of the database to you. So, you might want to look up, all the municipalities in Montgomery County. And then he will send you the list of municipalities, who the elected representatives are, and the contact information. And then, so that's the way we're going to be able to share that. And then, okay, so what the person is saying is that networking or sharing resources may be easier this way. The only problem is that Google, if we were to put this into a Google Doc, it would get to be a mess pretty quickly. We have to really have a curator of this database in order to keep it clean. And we say that from experience. We've done it both ways for different issues, and we really do have to curate the list. So we're happy to share whatever information you want in the list, and we'll be able to what we can do as we go along is make the information public as different municipalities pass resolutions and representatives approve letters or send in individual letters. And we'll if you have some suggestions of how that might be useful, please send an email to me or to Matthew, and we'll make it easy for people to know what's going on. Like maybe we'll have a Facebook, a closed Facebook group or something like that. Okay, here's another question. Will we have any people to come along with us as we talk to Township Environmental Committee? committees, such as experts. Karen, you want to take that one? Because I know you had some experience in this.
And could you rephrase the question? I wasn't sure I understood it.
So
to take people along?
Are there going to be people who are like experts who could go along with a person who wants to go to their municipality?
Okay, yeah. So actually, that's one of the things I've done a lot in Berks County is that the person who is going doesn't necessarily feel conversant. This was back, I'm thinking specifically of Act 13, which was a lot more complicated than this, but they didn't feel like they were conversant enough, so they asked me to go along with them. And so so that's what I was doing for people here in Berks, and this time I'll be doing it in Lehigh Valley as well. But it's just I think I have 122 municipalities when I consider all those 3 counties, and all of the meetings happen to always be like the first and third Monday. It just seems like everybody meets around the same time. So so that's why I was suggesting earlier that if there's any way to be there, that would be great. And I know I would try to be anywhere anybody needs me. But the other thing is to just review things in advance of the meeting. I think we can make ourselves available for that as well. In addition to anybody from our side being there, chances are there's not going to be anybody on their side other than the members of the of the committee. So I think if there's any like subject matter expertise required that isn't present in the room, that's when to bring a question back, and then we can find the appropriate expert to answer the questions, because I doubt that they'll have the experts they need on their end to answer questions either.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Karen. There's another question here. Are we supposed to go only to our own municipality? Absolutely not. You can go to any municipality you want to. The reason we were talking in terms of your own municipality is because the most successful attempts we've had at this involve a local constituent. So if you can get somebody who lives in the municipality to either be the person who speaks at the meeting, not you, or goes with you to the meeting, so you can say, I have Mary with me, and Mary is a constituent in this township, but she wanted me to speak to this issue. That is a lot more effective and has a bigger impact on the elected officials, because they're sitting there looking at somebody who votes in their township. So it's really good to try to approach your own township first, and when you go to a township, to try to have somebody who lives in that municipality or borough or city to be at the meeting with you and to say verbally, say out loud, they're with me because they live here. And they might, want to take over and speak themselves, or, you can just say, but I thought I would address these issues because I'm more, familiar with them, or something like that. But you don't have to live in that municipality. I find, I actually live in New Jersey, but, because I work for an organization in Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, and Delaware, with members in all of them, I seem to be able to not always be seen as a carpetbagger, but sometimes I am. But I do find that if I'm just on my own and not representing my organization, at least if I'm from that state, it helps, or even that county, it helps, than being totally from, a totally different place. I don't know if that answers your question, Joan, but I hope it does. And also you asked, in the past we went to supervisor meetings because the EAC was very limited. They only looked at things like recycling, and yes, that's the case in some municipalities, but not everyone. Like the example I gave of Morrisville Borough, they're much broader. They look at all environmental issues. They're involved in open space, riverfront restoration, as well as things like recycling, tree planting, and stuff like that. So it really depends on the municipality. There's some municipalities that don't even have active EACs at all. So you really need to find out, and you sometimes can do that really just by cruising their website. Do they have an EAC that meets? And if you can reach out to other people or maybe even ask us here, or if you're up around Karen's area, or Karen even knows plenty of people outside of Berks too. Just check in with us, and maybe, we know somebody in that municipality that would, if they had help from you, might actually do this.
Yeah, if I could just add that with respect to the first question, it really depends where you live, I think. But I would not go to most of the municipalities here in Berks County by myself, except for the fact that I'm Berks Guest Truth, which frankly cuts both ways because, I'm seen as evil tree hugger fracking woman, in parts of this county. And so, so if we're trying to appeal to them, for instance, a good talking point is extraction from water, of water from streams could affect fishermen's ability to fish. That's not an argument they expect to hear from me. So, they expect me to come in and railing about fracking. So again, it can cut both ways. So, so chances are, it's not a great idea for me to go out, whether I'm just doing it as an individual or as, Karen said, Berks Gas Truth, without somebody locally. And so that's always what I'm looking for here when we do it, is to, just partner with people who are willing also to do the legwork, because it's an awful lot of work to call all these places, and try to juggle all of it and make all the plans. So the more you can get local participants, the better. And then what we do when we go to the meetings together then is I have the local person, they're the ones on the agenda. They say, I brought Karen with me to explain this because, she can explain the situation better than I can. And then that's when I speak. So, I don't take a lead at all if I have anybody at all from the local municipality I'm working with to help me.
Great. Thank you, Karen. So we have another question here about people that are involved in our frack ban campaign through our coalition, and they were going to the New Jersey League of Municipalities last week. And yes, they did go. State legislators were there. We don't have a full report back yet, but I know because I got a couple of text messages on Saturday that state legislators did sign the letter. So that is moving forward, and it's a successful way to reach out to a bunch of legislators at once. Find out where they're going to be. And upcoming events with the holiday season and things like that, even something like that, if it has a business component, it's a good place to go to, where there's going to be a bunch of them at once and you can walk around and get 10, 15 names at one time. And that's what they were doing at the League. Now, that was many days long, and it was definitely, business-oriented annual convention for the League of Municipalities. But that's the kind of venue that can be a successful place to get a lot of names at once. Okay, do we have any other questions? I don't see any new questions on the list here. Oh, there was one, like, how many times should I reach out to my local official? I think, don't waste a lot of time on a deadbeat is my advice. What you should do is the ones that you think are going to write an individual letter, make sure they're ones that you think you at least have a sporting chance with if you bring them the data. Do they have an open mind? Are they going to listen to what science says? Are they going to hear what you're going to say because you're a constituent and you feel passionately about this, and they want to listen to what you say and support you? Then that's the kind of person you want to ask for an individual letter on their letterhead. Don't waste time with somebody who's not going to go there at all. However, the one thing about this, remember, is our second goal for this tool, and that is to educate and to expand our outreach to different constituents. So sometimes if you think somebody is particularly powerful and maybe you haven't heard them say too much about this issue, it might be because they don't know and nobody has come out to them and asked them. So even if they're maybe not your favorite person on some issues, maybe they'd surprise you, and maybe they're a fisherman and they care passionately about anything that would negatively affect fish and fish life. And they would therefore go for you and be with you on this issue. So don't have a closed mind about who to approach, but if you make attempts to call and you just can't, you're hitting a wall and it doesn't seem as if they're open-minded, don't waste a lot of time there, because we want a lot of these. We want to get as many amassed as we can, and then we also want quality, and then we want to also use this as an educational tool. But just remember those goals are a couple prongs to them. We want to impress the DRBC commissioners, and we also want to educate and outreach. Okay, any last questions before we finish up? We're almost to our hour. We want to honor everybody's time and really appreciate you spending the hour with us. Again, we're going to have another webinar in our series of webinars having to do with a complete and permanent ban on gas drilling and fracking and related activities throughout the Delaware River watershed. And we want you to join us for that next one. And as soon as we see those natural gas regulations issued by the DRBC, we'll be digging into them. And as soon as we can then schedule our first webinar after that to help you write comments and participate in that public comment process, we'll do that. So keep looking for those. And we're going to be sending a follow-up email. And in the follow-up email, we'll be asking you for any follow-up questions that you have. We'll send you links that we provided during this chat. We'll also send you further information about the database and how to get in touch with Matthew in order to get information on that. And if you have any follow-up questions after you get that email, please get back to us. This is an iterative process, and we're making these tools and expanding what we're doing in order to be able to successfully achieve a complete and permanent ban on fracking. So we're all in there together, and this is just another way that we're going to get there. Thank you all for joining. Appreciate your time very much this evening, and we look forward to seeing you. Watch for what happens around November 30th. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for getting on the call.